Welcome to another episode of This Month in Mormon Studies, your monthly recap of news, blogs, book releases, and events in the field of Mormon studies. This show is co-sponsored by Kofford Books and the Mormon News Report, co-hosted by Brian Whitney and the devilishly handsome Brandt Malone. How you doing, Brandt?
Oh, you are so kind, Brian. And you know, it is co-sponsored by the Mormon News Report if I ever get back to doing it. I'm hoping to be done with my weird hiatus beginning of 2017. But yes, it's still a big part of my life.
Well, by the time that you get done with your hiatus, it'd be a good time to start a new one.
There you go.
And this month we have a special guest with us. Stephanie Lauritzen from Signature Books is on the line. How's it going, Stephanie?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Well, hey, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what you do at Signature Books?
I started at Signature Books in September. I was a history teacher before that. At Signature Books, I'm the marketing director, and I'm in charge of making sure our books are available for everybody and letting people know what we've got coming up.
Now, is it true that Ron Prittis, the managing director at Signature, is a huge fan of fruitcake? I've heard that that's a thing. Just say yes. Just say yes.
Yes, that's absolutely true.
Good.
See, and those are the inside scoops you can expect to hear on a podcast like this.
Let's have this quality.
Riveting inside scoops.
Well, I want everyone listening, which is like probably, 12 people, including my mom, to send Ron Prittis at Signature Books a fruitcake. The address to Signature Books.
Actually, hold up. Could you switch that and send him some binder clips?
Does he need binder clips?
Then he needs a lot of binder clips, actually.
What's with the binder clips, Stephanie?
We're not allowed to use them anymore because they offend Ron. That's a direct quote.
See, the scoops keep coming.
So we have these huge manuscripts, and it's like, a binder clip would be great right now, but they offend Ron.
They actually offend him.
Yep.
Okay, so everybody listening to the show, please send fruitcake and binder clips to Ron Prittis at Signature Books at 564 400 North, Salt Lake City, Utah, 84116. He likes fruitcake with all the nuts and binder clips.
Favorite things.
Merry Christmas, guys. Why don't we go ahead and start with the news?
The Neal A. Maxwell Institute for Religious Scholarship released a 25-minute film in November featuring scholars from a variety of backgrounds talking about the values of the Institute, including building bridges of understanding, increasing religious literacy, and exploring and experiencing the relationship between faith and reason, religion, and scholarship. It was directed by Sterling Van Wagenen, and the film features scholars from a variety of backgrounds discussing how these values are manifest in the Institute scholarship, including former BYU President Cecil O. Samuelson, Lori Maffley Kipp, current BYU President Kevin Worthen, Kathleen Flake, Richard Bushman, Terrell Givens, Rosalind Welch, Morgan Davis, and J. Spencer Fluman, the current executive director of the Maxwell Institute. And we'll include a link to that video in the show notes.
And bouncing off of this video and including a lot of the people that were interviewed in it, the Neal A. Maxwell Institute has also announced that they're going to be doing a visiting scholar program. And they're going to have scholars such as Richard Bushman, Terrell Givens coming in and doing guest visiting lectures. I think that the first one who's going to be their official on-site visiting scholar is going to be Philip Barlow from Utah State University. He's the chair of Mormon Studies up there.
And I think they're pretty good about putting them all online. So for people who aren't in Utah and who can't make it, someone like myself, they're usually really good about getting them up on the website for you to watch it later.
Yeah, this is good stuff.
So Edward Kimball, son of former LDS President Spencer W. Kimball and biographer, passed away on November 21st, 2016, at the age of 86. Peggy Fletcher Stack, in her article regarding his passing, talked with son Chris Kimball, who said, "My father wanted to make a difference in the world of Mormon history and biography by breaking the mold of hagiography. Ed Kimball began first in 1977, writing the first volume of Father Spencer W. Kimball's life when he was still alive. He followed that up with 2005's Lengthen Your Stride, the presidency of Spencer W. Kimball, recounting his father's time as president of the LDS Church. Interestingly, Peggy Fletcher Stack reveals in her memoriam on Ed Kimball that Edward Kimball did not always agree with his father's approach, with some of the ideas his dad put forth in his landmark 1969 volume, The Miracle of Forgiveness. Indeed, wrote the son, Miracle was a book more on sin and repentance than on forgiveness. And even his father later seemed to wish that he had adopted a gentler tone. Last year, with Edward Kimball's approval, Desert Book quietly discontinued its publication, 30 years after the late LDS leader's death in 1985. We'll have the link to the Salt Lake Tribune story in our show notes, and Jonathan Stapley also posted a very touching tribute to Ed Kimball at By Common Consent.
So this book is actually one of the more influential books in my life. I think I got it in 2005 when it first came out, not the reprinting that came out in 2010. But this was at a point where I was really starting to expand a lot of my own personal boundaries. I had just gotten back from an LDS mission. I picked up Rushstone Rolling, and I picked up this book. And it was just like those two books are two of the most influential books. And I would also say if anyone's interested in picking up that book, you need to make sure you get the book that has the working manuscript, which is about twice as long as the book, but includes everything that Deseret Book edited out. But Whoa. Ed Kimball made an agreement that said, no, I actually want to get as much of this out as possible.
As I was mentioning a little bit earlier in the show, there was big news from the Neal A. Maxwell Institute in November with the announcement of the addition of visiting fellows and other affiliated scholars for 2017. I'd already mentioned that Philip Barlow and Terrell Givens had been named as the inaugural Neal A. Maxwell Institute Fellows, but along with pursuing major individual research projects, they'll provide lectures, colloquia, seminars, and co-direct the Institute's summer seminar on Mormon culture. In addition to them, Deidre Nicole Green, Michael McKay Hubbard, and Catherine Taylor will join the Institute as visiting fellows in 2017, pursuing major research projects. Luke Drake has been named the Maxwell Institute Scholar in Residence for the summer of 2017. Rachel Cope has been selected to succeed Morden Davis as managing editor of the Mormon Studies Review. That's a pretty big shift. And finally, Tana Hangen will join Blair Hodges as co-editor of the Maxwell Institute's Living Faith book series. Some big changes happening over the Maxwell Institute. All good stuff. They're expanding, they're broadening out, bringing in other scholars. This is some neat stuff going on over there.
And those are major names too. Like I think one of the more important things is you could have someone who's maybe a little newer in getting into Mormon studies, and they could look at some of those names and go, okay, I'm more comfortable with that, so I might be more comfortable in what they're doing and kind of pursuing this more deep path of Mormon studies versus potentially what you could get from just a basic Sunday school.
Elder D. Todd Christofferson of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles made history this last month as the first LDS apostle in United States history to offer an invocation on the Senate floor. Opening a session of the Senate, Christofferson was invited by Utah Senator Orrin Hatch, and Christofferson was also invited by Hatch to speak at the Library of Congress event honoring the Book of Mormon as the fourth most influential book that shaped America. The Mormon Newsroom picked up the story, noting Elder Christofferson also spoke of the Book of Mormon's impact on literature, which today includes literary readings of the Book of Mormon in university-level English courses across the country. Such classes allow the Book of Mormon to speak for itself rather than debating historical accuracy or Joseph Smith's methods of translating the book. You don't have to believe in its historic claims to appreciate the Book of Mormon as literature, Elder Christofferson said, quoting LDS scholar David Bokovoy. Interestingly enough, Christofferson also noted that the Book of Mormon has 4 out of 5 stars in the Apple Store. So that was another ringing endorsement for the Book of Mormon.
I mean, on the one hand, you could sit there and go, wow, that's a major award and a major achievement to be honored at the Library of Congress as one of the most important books on university literature. You could sit there and say, well, I mean, we got that, but hey, we got 4 out of 5 stars on the Apple Store, so we got to have something.
He brought it up in the speech, so obviously it's important.
No, actually, I think the major thing though was the fact that he quoted Bokovoy and that sentence there. You don't have to believe in his historical claims to appreciate the Book of Mormon as literature. I wonder how many people are going to take that and run with it. Like that is a big door that's being opened, and it was just a small little sentence on Mormon Newsroom, so it's pretty official.
I mean, it means that David is actually on the radar of at least one apostle, right? I mean, that's pretty incredible.
For better or for worse. So I had this special file on my desk. This is from the When One Door Closes, Another Door Opens files. Peggy Fletcher Stack from the Salt Lake Tribune has a report out that says the LDS pamphlet to young men only, which was written by late Quorum of the 12 President Boyd K. Packer, has been removed from the Face website and store.lds.org for ecclesiastical leaders to obtain printed copies. Packer, who died in 2015, approached the topic during the October 1976 all-male priestess session of General Conference. In it, the late apostle used the euphemism little factory to describe the male anatomy. Packer's original sermon remains on the website under the General Conference section, according to spokesperson Doug Anderson, but it is common practice for the church to retire publications. In its place, I'd like to recommend everyone to go to the LDS store website and find Revelations in Context, which is a wonderful little book that's going to take the context behind the LDS revelations and put them out to everyone. So when one door closes, another door opens.
I'm gonna miss the phrase "little factory," though. It's one of those things that kind of crept into Mormon pop culture.
It's gone, but it'll never be forgotten.
It'll never be forgotten. But I do have a couple of thoughts on Revelations in Context. This was put together a couple of years ago. Actually, I think it was in 2012. They started working on it for the 2013. I think it was the last time that we did the Doctrine and Covenants and the Gospel Doctrine class. They had initially rolled it out for that, but they got it out a little bit late, so it didn't really catch on, and it was only online. They didn't print anything, and so, it didn't really get integrated into the curriculum at that time. But it's been on their website, the church history website, the official one, history.lds.org, for the past several years. Just kind of growing and sitting there, and more contributing articles would come in from historians, mostly staff historians, mostly those who work on the Joseph Smith papers or other projects that are under the church history umbrella. I would say that this is more of an apt replacement for Our Heritage. Our Heritage was well, let's just face it, it was just garbage history. I'm just gonna
don't hold back. There, right? Yeah. Let us know how you feel.
I'm gonna put it out there. This is far better contextualized into American history. Like, just as for an example, the revelation that they contextualize for D&C 86 on the Word of Wisdom, they at least make it a point to discuss the temperance movement, in relationship with that. So, and they also at least make it a point to discuss that the early Mormons didn't have an issue with fermented drinks. And that really kind of came out later during like the Prohibition era. So, they're being far more open and candid about a lot of those things.
Sort of related to this, gospel topics essays are now added to Sunday school lessons on the Doctrine and Covenants, preparing for next year's curriculum. The LDS Church is making an effort to include more scholarship in their Sunday school materials, but according to Peggy Fletcher Stack, it will be complicated. Stack writes, rather than redo the Sunday school manual, a curriculum guide for lay teachers to explore the text and themes in the compilation of Revelations, mostly to Smith, called the Doctrine and Covenants, Mormon leaders chose simply to add the new material at the end of existing lesson plans as they appear online. So each lesson will begin with an introduction, directing teachers to the resource writings at the conclusion, says Matthew McBride, editor-in-chief of the history.lds.org, who oversees the publication of the essays on that site. Of particular relevance to the D&C is a series of articles, Revelations in Context, which we talked about just a minute ago, which provides stories behind specific sections, McBride says, as well as insights gleaned from the landmark multi-year, multi-volume Joseph Smith Papers project. The extra resources also will include various descriptions of Smith's first vision, which Latter-day Saints believe was an actual exchange with God and Jesus, but which the founding Mormon prophet described differently on separate occasions. Then there are the groundbreaking gospel topic essays, ranging from priesthood and polygamy to the nature of God and Mormon belief in a heavenly mother. Most of these supplements will be available in 10 languages online starting next week, and then printed and available in the LDS distribution centers by the year's end. So McBride mentioned that this was a good faith effort on the church to be transparent and authentic in their lesson plans. But if you read Peggy's article on it, a lot of church historians who've gone through the resources included are pretty skeptical of them, saying, yeah, you put an essay on the end, but for someone who isn't reading these essays regularly or doing a lot of study on their own in Mormon history, these essays are probably more likely to just be confusing or dense, and teachers won't know what to do with them. So throwing the materials on at the end of a lesson isn't necessarily going to get the information out there, because most people will probably not choose to put them in their lessons. Kind of, again, Mormons are going to morm. They're going to create lessons that appeal to what they believe and not necessarily historical facts that might cause contention. Mormons hate that. And nobody wants to start a Sunday school fight. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm projecting a little bit, but I'm kind of skeptical about this move.
Well, okay, so two things. Number one, congratulations for actually putting them in there, right? Because that's one thing that we've been all complaining about, that the gospel topic essays were written, but they were just dissolved into the netherverse of the black hole of the internet, right? So congratulations for actually putting them in there. Number two, I agree with you wholeheartedly that putting them as the end at the end as supplemental reading material is not going to make much of a difference, because all gospel doctrine teachers that I know write their lessons during sacrament meeting. On the other hand, at least the opportunity is there, and it's, and I guess if we feel like the world doesn't implode because those are there at the end of the lessons, then maybe future curriculum might integrate some of their language more.
Right. I'm somewhere in between the two of you. On the one hand, I say, awesome, you're putting more information out there. And for someone like me who really enjoys making people uncomfortable at church, I can sit there and go, you can't get mad at me now because it's official and you can't do anything. But at the same time, Steph, I'm with you, because I'm sitting here going, nobody reads. Nobody cares. And if you don't have the context for this, if you don't know what you're talking about, the nerds that know what's going on, they might go, oh, there's something there. But people are going to do what they want to do. And I think about it from an organizational standpoint. I think that's a huge victory that the history department was able to get this stuff in there. The next question is going to be, okay, so now what? Is this the end game? Is this the victory? Or is this just step one in trying to get more stuff out there? And it's too early to call, but I'm trying to temper my own cynicism.
Hey, we should talk about some blogs, right? So, let's kick off with Ben Parkett, Juvenile Instructor. He posted 2016 in retrospect, an overview of noteworthy books and articles in Mormon history. Ben Parkett has been putting this out every year. As long as I've known him, which is probably about 4 or 5 years now. And it's really the go-to list that he publishes every year. I mean, I know that, Ben, yes, I'm stroking your ego a little bit here if you listen to this episode. But really, I have based my purchases and my reading on Ben Park's list more than once. And I probably will again, after I read this article as well.
Since we're all boarding the Ben Park train, I might as well board it as well. So, like you said, he's been doing this for years. I do the same thing. I'll be honest. This one and his look forward at the forthcoming publications are two of my favorite blog posts of the year. And I think that the best part about his retrospect is it's almost like rediscovering a lot of, oh, that's right, this came out, that was really good. And especially if you're thinking about stuff way back in March, I mean, the way that some of this stuff goes, all of a sudden it's like, a week goes by and it feels like a year. But being able to go back and just for example, being able to go back and revisit Kate Holbrook and Matt Bowman's Women in Mormonism, Historical and Contemporary Perspectives by the University of Utah Press. I read that over the summer, and that was 6 months ago. And it's like, oh, that's right. That was a great book, and I should be recommending that to someone.
In a blog post at Zelophehad's Daughters last month, LDS researcher Christian Anderson has been tracking the mentions of the phrase Heavenly Parents at General Conference. His findings, conference sermons this year used the term a record 15 times. That's 67% higher than the previous mark of 9 set in 2013 and 2015. Anderson writes, half of the 56 talks that mention Heavenly Parents have been delivered in the last 4 years. And just as, again, some mild cynicism, we're talking about Heavenly Parents more, but I think in that same blog post he mentioned that we've only mentioned Heavenly Mother 2 more times than the last record sent. So Heavenly Parents, yes. Heavenly Mother, no.
Yeah, and, I'm going to throw out a little bit more cynicism at this because apparently that's the direction that we're going. It's the holiday season.
This is what happens when you have me on a podcast. This is the sunshine.
It just diminishes.
From a black hole, guys.
I can't help but think about the rise of, I'm glad that we're discussing the concept of Heavenly Parents more. It's a unique Mormon theological aspect within the realm of Christian denominations that I think is kind of cool, and it's something that can be explored more. But at the same time, I can't help but think that the rise of this is coinciding also with kind of the gender normativeness of heterosexual marriage emphasis that we have, right? So
it's complementary theory. It's right. Like the Victorians came up with it, and now we're like revamping it. But yeah, in order to have Heavenly Parents, you have to have a Heavenly Mother and a Heavenly Father. Right. So yeah, this is it's a
repurposing.
So looking at more of the blogs, The Exponent has been doing some really great stuff lately. I just recently redid all of my RSS feeds on a new, this is so nerdy, on a new RSS news fetcher. And so I had to type in all these feeds. I know. And finally re-upped my feed for the Exponent, and they've been doing really great stuff on the Mormon studies realm. So one of the ones that was just posted was a talk or a speech that Jessica Finnegan, Carrie Waters, and Nancy Ross gave at MHA 2015. They actually published the entire text. It was called "What Are Mormon Feminists Trying to Do?" It's really good. Brian or Steph, were you there at MHA when this was going on, or do you remember anything about this?
Yeah, well, I was outside their door sitting at the Greg Kofford Books table while it was happening, and what I can say is that there was a lot of people in there, and there was a lot of applause. I have no idea what was said, but I'll read the article.
Standing room only. Nancy Ross also has a really good book review, and we'll probably talk about this book a little later. It is 100 Birds Taught Me to Fly by Ashley May Hoyland. It's put out as far as the Living Faith series by the Maxwell Institute. Again, if you're not following the Exponent and you're interested in Mormon studies, they're doing really good stuff. So it's not just about women's issues within the church, but they're actually starting to take a lot more of an academic and a scholarly approach to everything that's going on with that.
Fair Mormon has been on a Mormon studies spree recently. Just a few articles to highlight would be Joseph M. Spencer's Braving Nephi's Isaiah. Also, Michael Hubbard McKay's Translating with Seer Stones. And Brant Gardner did an interview titled The Book of Mormon, A Closer Look. Finally, Matthew J. Grove from the Church History Department did an interview titled Emma Smith, an Elect Lady. These are great interviews. These are fantastic scholars that have a lot of great insight into these. So, kudos to Fair Mormon for reaching out to them and for publishing these really good articles, really good interviews. Check them out.
So Steve Evans at By Common Consent Book Review Roundup, Leonard Arrington and the Writing of Mormon History as a must-read, BYU New Testament Commentary, The Revelation of John and the Apostle and the Testimony of Luke, calls this a worthwhile effort. Joseph Smith Papers, Council of 50 Minutes, he refers to as fascinating and a great volume. American Universities and the Birth of Modern Mormonism, short yet provocative. 100 Birds Taught Me to Fly, and he calls this the sort of book you read and then buy for all of your friends and family, and I do entirely agree on that one. I am cold and dead inside, but 100 Birds Taught Me to Fly is beautiful, and I was a little less dead at the end. So there's my recommendation on top of it. Yes, it is. A little less dead at the end.
So following up on Stephanie's nice little review of Ashley May Hoyland's 100 Birds Taught Me to Fly, she has a great piece at By Common Consent where it talks a lot about her experiences, not just going through this book tour that she goes through, but what writing the book meant to her. And so after hearing, Steph, your review, after reading this, after reading a lot of the great things that people are writing, it made it on my Amazon wish list. And I just want to let my family know, if they quite possibly listen to this, we have Amazon Prime, so you could get that book to me in like 2 days. So it's not too late to get it yet.
In conjunction with Peggy Fletcher Stack's piece on the updated Sunday school curriculum, Jonathan Stapley also has a piece at By Common Consent with his tools for teachers in 2017, including a section on the introductions and context to the D&C sections, as well as some historical book recommendations to make sense of everything in 2017. Jonathan Stapley is a sharp individual who's very well read, so I would definitely take his recommendations seriously.
I'm going to make a bold statement. You ready for this? This is a bold statement. I think that 2017 for Mormons is going to be a very pivotal year when it comes to how we're going to approach our Sunday schools and our history, because it seems like there's a lot of stuff coming out recently and a lot of people are pushing transparent history, authentic history, and specifically the most documentation that we could get with it. And so the interesting thing is going to be, what do Mormons in general do with all this that's out there, and what do they do with it when it comes to the church? There's my bold statement. So
Brandt, I think it's going to be a very big year with a lot of very big changes in how the approach to the church history goes that nobody will notice.
Thank you. Yes.
Except for us.
Right.
Yeah, we'll notice.
Moving on to book releases. This is one in my backyard, and this is one that I'm actually very sensitive to. Donald Faber from the University of Michigan Press put out a book called James Jesse Strang, The Rise and Fall of Michigan's Mormon King. In a profile of the book by Michigan Public Radio, Joan Donaldson writes, one of the biography's greatest strengths is that Faber explains the cultural background of the early 1800s and how it influenced Strang. During this period of political and social change, Strang experienced the energy of Protestant camp meetings and read about the utopian communities such as New Harmony, Indiana, and the Shaker villages dotting the East Coast. Eventually, the young lawyer from New York embraced the Mormon faith that, quote, had a beguiling simplicity, end quote. So here's the reason why it's important to me. Beaver Island, where James Strang is, that's been a part of my family for literally generations. My grandparents owned a shop on Beaver Island. They were actually the owners, I believe, of the Mormon jail on Beaver Island. My mom's side of the family has lived up in northern Michigan their entire life. So I've always known about James Strang. There's been a lot of stuff that's come out about him. So I'm intrigued to read this. I haven't read it yet to see if it's going to be something new or something interesting. But there's yet another book on James Strang in Michigan.
Greg Kofford Books published something that's a little bit of a step away from the normal scholarship that they're known for, with The Garden of Enid: Adventures of a Weird Mormon Girl. This is actually a graphic novel that was put together by Scott Hales. It was a webcomic series that has been collected together for 2 volumes. So this is the first volume. The second volume will be coming out, I believe, in February of 2017. It's about a 15-year-old girl named Enid Gardner who is a self-proclaimed, quote, weird Mormon girl. When she isn't chatting with Joseph Smith or the Book of Abraham Mummy, she's searching for herself between the spaces of doubt and belief. Along the way, she must grapple with her Mormon faith as it adapts to the 21st century. She also must confront the painful mysteries at the heart of her strained relationship with her ailing mother. You know, the thing about this book, I absolutely love this book, and Scott Hales had a huge following online prior to getting this book published, and putting it all together as one volume, I think, really helps this story, because when it's individual panels that are published weekly, sometimes with with life going on in between seeing each comic panel, it's hard to keep track of the story that he was developing. But when it's all put together in something you can sit down and read as one collected volume, you're like, oh wow, there actually is a narrative behind this. There's something that she's progressing through. And me, I mean, I'm a huge comic geek as it is, so I was just like, yes, when Greg Kofford Books landed this one from Scott Hales. How it ties into Mormon studies and why would even mention it on this show, besides the fact that Greg Kofford Books is this, co-sponsor of the show, is Enid is, despite being a 15-year-old girl, incredibly aware of the Mormon studies scene, and that's partly because Scott Hales himself is incredibly aware of the Mormon studies scene. And so she was aware of the Gospel Topics essays as they were coming out, and so a lot of the questions that she brings up, a lot of the things that she's pondering, are the types of questions that get discussed online with Mormons who are questioning faith and who are looking at all the resources that are published out there and whatnot. One of my favorite panels that he put out was Enid is having this imaginary conversation with Joseph Smith, where she says, yeah, so I have some questions about polygamy, and Joseph Smith has a cell phone in his hand and says, let me get Brian Hales on the line. Right? So, and it's great because like nerds like us in the Mormon studies scene can totally get that joke. My 12-year-old daughter, who I want to get the book for, is going to be clueless as to what that's all about. She's like, okay, I don't get that at all, Dad. That's just dumb. But, for us, like, so that's what I say. It's like written for kind of a Mormon studies crowd to some extent. At least we'll get the inside jokes on it. And it's just a delight.
The one thing I'll add about Enid, I haven't read the book yet, but I do follow him on Twitter. The way that I would kind of describe it is like, it's almost the Mormon version of Calvin and Hobbes, in the sense of you could look at the cartoons and it's fun. It'll make you laugh in some parts, but then there's other parts where you take a step back and go, holy cow, that was really deep in just a simple little goofy cartoon. So that's what I like the most about it. And that's why I've liked following him. And he's actually been great to follow on Twitter, especially for something like LDS General Conference weekend. He really is just such a good guy. So
you guys talked about this in last month's podcast, but Natural Born Seer, Joseph Smith, American Prophet, 1805 through 1830 by Richard S. Van Wagner, is out, and I finished reading the book 2 weeks ago. So what I think distinguishes Natural Born Seer from, I think the closest contemporary is obviously Rough Stone Rolling. Both Bushman and Van Wagner kind of walk that line between, like, we're going to reveal some stuff about Joseph Smith that isn't necessarily favorable, but then Bushman tends to, in my opinion, always step in with sort of the apologist approach afterwards. And I like Van Wagner a little bit better, although I like and respect Bushman too. But Van Wagner, I think, trusts his audience a little more and doesn't have to hold your hand through it. It's not a book that's, for apostates or whatever, and it's not designed to make you distrust Joseph Smith or lose your faith in Joseph Smith. But I think Van Wagner assumes that the reader can deal with this information and process it in whatever way they feel is best. And that leaves so much more room for detail and study and alternate theories. And I think that sets it apart a little bit from Bushman, is there's more room for detail. And, I mean, it's from 1805 to 1830, so it's just the early part of Joseph Smith's life. And because it's only a small section of his life, you can get into a lot more depth and a lot more detail.
Yeah, and what I'd mentioned in the last episode was what you were saying there at the end. I mean, this is a 600-page plus volume from Van Wagner on just 1805 to 1830, right?
Right.
And so if you're going to do a comparison, it's really would be more comparable, at least as far as the time period that it covers, to Bushman's earlier work, which was Joseph Smith and the Beginnings of Mormonism, which covers the same period in about 250 pages. So, you got about 3 times the amount of just page volume in this from what Bushman did. You're going to have a lot more detail from that.
And not just on Joseph, too. I mean, he takes that same sort of in-depth analysis of Joseph's family, of the people in his life. You see Lucy in a much more nuanced light, I think, in Van Wagner's book, and you start to understand that, Joseph was representing something for her that was deeply important. He was fulfilling a prophecy. She names him and says, you are going to be a prophet when you grow up, essentially. And I think Bushman treats Lucy sort of, there's a pedestal there a little bit. He puts her on a pedestal and she's perfect and long-suffering and everybody's always being terrible to her and nothing that happens to the family is her fault or Joseph Sr.'s fault. And Joseph's family life is a lot more dynamic and complex in Van Wagner's book. And I appreciated that and thought it was interesting.
So if I understand kind of where you're going with the book, it sounds like Natural Born Seer is already assuming that you have a baseline knowledge of what he's going to be talking about. So the goal is not to sway you in one way or the other. It's basically, here's as much research as we could find about this period of Joseph Smith's life. You could do with it what you want, but we're going to include as much as we possibly can so you can make your own decision about, Joseph or Lucy or Joseph Sr. or whatever.
25 theories that might explain it from 10 different people. Okay. So, I mean, it doesn't hold your hand as much, but it gives you a lot more information.
So Van Wagner's earlier work, though, Mormon Polygamy and Sidney Rigdon, A Portrait of Religious Excess, I mean, these were critical books, and they were award-winning books again, and they are completely influential on Mormon studies. I mean, they were landmark. His Mormon Polygamy book at the time was really that was the go-to book. I mean, there's been so many volumes published since, including George D. Smith's Nauvoo Polygamy and, More Wives Than One and now Brian Hale's work. But his work was really, that was the first real comprehensive scholarly treatment, of the subject. And then, I mean, that biography of Sidney Rigdon, to me, that was just mind blowing. It was a fairly small book too, but that was wow, this is such a good analysis of Sidney Rigdon and who he was as an individual. This whole series really has been greatly anticipated and has been, worked on for a long time. I mean, these writers that you guys have for these have been commissioned a long time ago. For this, and it's just really starting to come out. But what do we have to look forward to in the future? Because it's not done yet.
No. So 2 books out of the 3 are out. And because Signature Books is weird, so we have Natural Born Seer that goes to 1830. And then we have Martha Bradley Evans' book, Glorious in Persecution.
Which is phenomenal.
Which is amazing. Yeah. And it's 1839 to 44. And so that in between years, those 9 years in between from 1830 to 1839 are the last book, and it's the middle book. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know, Ron's going to kill me if this is wrong. I think Vogel's doing it.
No, I've heard that.
Yeah. There was somebody else doing it originally. Now we've switched. And so I think, it's in production and it's happening. But I mean, I read an article the other day about this particular trilogy from the Smith Pettit Foundation, and it was slated for release in 2007. And so obviously it's not 2007. But what I appreciated about it is that they're really well done. So.
Well, and everything from Smith Pettit is Smith. They go top shelf on everything. So it's good stuff.
So I wish I had a release date on it, but even if I did, it would be a lie. So
right.
But it's there, it's happening. We've got 2 out of the 3 books. They've all been great so far. I'm really looking forward to that middle volume.
And the good news is we do have one to look forward to.
Yeah, always.
So rounding out the podcast for this month, We'll go to the call for papers and conferences section. The University of Utah held their final panel in conjunction with Brian Birch's amazing intellectual Life of Mormonism course that he's been conducting and teaching at campus there on Thursday, December 8th, featuring General Authority Emeritus and former church historian Marlon K. Jensen, Lisa Tate, J. Spencer Fluman, and Grant Underwood, titled The LDS Church and the Academic Study of Mormonism. Tad Walsh at the Deseret News covered the event. He has some great insights and stories from Jensen and his time and his experiences as specifically as church historian. The thing that I was most impressed with Tad's write-up is sometimes the Deseret book caters to a certain audience. And Tad was fairly forthcoming with his write-up on specifically the things that Marlon was saying about what life is like as a church historian and some of the struggles that he faced as a historian, and how do you publish things, what do you want to do. The sad thing is that was the last panel of this whole discussion. So it sounds like his course is going to run its course, no pun intended, through the end of this semester. But I'm hoping this opens the door at the University of Utah for more of these courses to happen. From what I heard, they had about 100 people at this session. So hopefully that's enough of a success for them to do more of it in 2017.
All right, so call for applications. The 2017 Mormon Theology Seminar, the 4th annual summer seminar in Mormon theology, God Himself Shall Come Down, reading Mosiah 15. It's going to be held at the College of William and Mary, Williamsburg, Virginia, from June 5th to June 17th, 2017. This is sponsored by the Mormon Theology Seminar in partnership with the Laura F. Weil Center for the Book of Mormon Studies and the Neal A. Maxwell Institute for Religious Scholarship. We'll give you more information at their website. If you're interested in applying for that, the deadline is approaching quickly.
And there is a call for papers, Mormon Scholars in the Humanities, from May 26th through the 27th, 2017, at Boston University.
Well, that rounds us out for this month in Mormon Studies, November edition. And Stephanie, it was great to have you on this show this month.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm happy to bring my dark, snarky comments to your beautiful, lovely podcast.
Well, Stephanie, you made me alive just a little bit more.
Thanks, that's my praise.
And Brandt, as always, appreciate having you on as a co-host.
You got it. Thank you for having me on.